Hey guys, Chris here, and welcome to the only video you'll ever need when it comes to the suckety gear crafting system in War of the Visions. The gear system is probably the single most convoluted and confusing part of the game, but worry not, young Moogle, by the end of this video, you too will be a master gear craftsman. And I'll cover everything from enhancing to crafting and stat growth, hammers and seals. We'll talk about one catastrophic mistake that people make when crafting, and how to use the +2 strategy and dismantling so that you never set yourself back when crafting for the future. And finally, I was going to do a live +5 crafting at the end of this video, but everything ran pretty long here, so I'll actually post that separately as a part 2 and link it in the description below. I know this is a long video, but everything is timestamped, so feel free to skip around to different parts of the video if you really need to. If you like the video, there's buttons below to show your everlasting appreciation, and check some of our other videos out on War of the Visions. Alright Sid, grab your hammer and let's get to work. The first big question we need to answer is, why even build a +5 version of gear? And this answer is pretty simple. The primary benefit to increasing the plus value on almost every piece of gear is the passive bonus that comes with the gear. For example, swords give a passive bonus to slash attack, hats give a bonus to evasion, etc. The +5 version is usually much better than the +4 version. For example, the Nagnarok goes from providing slash attack up 8 at +4 to slash attack up 15 at +5. So basically this means you'll get an increase in about 7% damage just by having the +5 over the +4. And for you War of the Vision stat nerds out there, I know it's not exactly 7%, but that's not the point of this video. We're just going to keep things simple. The second reason to create higher plus versions of gear is that the stat growth will be slightly higher on the higher plus versions of gear. So for example, a +5 Nagnarok on average will have higher stats than a +0 or a +2 Nagnarok. But the important phrase here is on average. So now we talk about stat growth, because while you might think looking at this +5 Nagnarok that once I level it up, it's going to have 162 attack, you'd be wrong. Each time you level up a piece of gear, there's only a chance that each stat increases, which means more often than not, you won't get the stats that the weapon is actually showing you. As you can see on this Rasel Gathi here, which only got 70 attack out of the possible 144, despite being max level. And this is one of the ways in which the gear system in War of the Visions kinda sucks. You can grind forever, get everything you need to make a max weapon, do everything right, and just get screwed on the RNG and end up with suboptimal equipment. So how do we give ourselves the best chance at getting maxed out gear? Well, this is where seals and hammers come in, but before we dive into that, there's a few things that we need to know. The first thing is that optimizing gear is different for every single piece of gear. And more than that, it's different for the different types of gear as well. For example, a Vital Nagnarok is much easier to get max stats on than an Assault Nagnarok, and an Assault Nagnarok is going to be different than an Assault Lionheart replica. Because of this, there's really no good catch-all rule for maxing all gear. There is an online equipment database you can use to compare the different types for gear and the average ending stats, which I'll link in the description below, and hopefully by the time you're watching this video, this database is still up and running. So now that's out of the way, there's two basic ways to increase the stat rolls on gear. One is by increasing the plus level of gear, as we mentioned, and the other is by using seals. Seals basically increase the chance that a stat will go up when you level the gear. You'll need 1 seal per level, so you'll need 50 seals in total for a piece of level 50 gear. Remember though that there's no guarantees here. You could use 50 seals and get screwed with bad rolls, and you could use no seals and get blessed with good rolls. Try to think of it like a 5-card poker hand. Using a seal is kind of like getting to draw an extra card into your hand. Sure, now you have 6 cards and you have a better chance at winning, but you still can lose with a 6-card hand, and you still might have won with just a 5-card hand. Obviously, as a general rule, it's a pretty good idea to use seals when you're leveling up a +5 piece of equipment, but even with seals, most of the time you won't end up with maximum stats, and this is where hammers come in. Hammers let you increase the base stats of a piece of gear. They're kind of like the icing on the cake, so to speak. You use them at the very end of the leveling and awakening process to top off the stats, And there's a few things to keep in mind about hammers. 99% of the time you'll be using hammers at the very end to top a piece of gear off, but there's a couple select pieces of gear that benefit from using hammers first and then leveling. I need to put this caveat in here because there's going to be the stat nerds that come in here and like, well actually Chris, if you hammer HP on a Sage's hat at level 1, you'll numbers, stats, numbers, and yeah, I get it, but as a general rule, hammers are for topping off gear. This is because if you use hammers early on any gear, you're committing to whatever the stat rolls, whether they're good or bad. Going back to our poker hand, hammers are basically being able to take any one card from the deck and add it to your hand. However, what this means is that even a bad hand can't be saved by hammers, and this is where resmithing comes in. Resmithing hammers let you basically reset the rolls completely on a piece of gear. So if you get like a really bad roll, like my amazing Ras Algathi here, you could reset it to level 1 and roll again. Going back to our poker hand, this is kind of like essentially getting to draw a brand new hand. However, keep in mind that any hammers or seals that you spend are going to be lost, so you're redrawing your standard 5-card hand even if you spent seals before and had a 6-card hand. So with every piece of gear, when you get it to level 50, you'll have to decide on whether you're willing to use your stat hammers on the gear or resmith and try your luck again. Most of the time you'll be able to get what you want out of stat hammers, but resmithing hammers are sort of there as a safety net against really bad rolls. So now that we understand how the process works, let's talk about how we get there, and perhaps the biggest, most catastrophic crafting mistake in War of the Visions is using awakened gear to craft. This mistake can and will cost you hundreds of equipment books if you don't understand what you're doing. My brother did it once, I did it once, and the forums are littered with people who have done this. For example, when crafting a +1, you need 2 +0s. When crafting a +2, you need 2 +1s. When crafting a +3, you need 2 +2s, and so on all the way up to +5. So in the end, the golden number is 63, which is the total number of recipes you need to make a +5 version of any gear. The number one bottleneck to climbing this pyramid is going to be the equipment books. This is because as you move up the pyramid, you also need higher level gear. +2s need to be level 20 to craft +3s, and so on. However, the suckety suck crafting system doesn't really care if you've over-leveled your crafting materials. So if I go to crafting here and I see, oh look, I can make a Ras Algathi +1, gee willikers Wilson, that's amazing. What's not so amazing is that the game isn't telling me that it's using my 2 level 50 Ras Algathis for this, and I get a single level 1 +1 Ras Algathi. Meaning that if I went through with this, I'd be vaporizing 510 gun books with the push of a button. And you'd be shocked at how often people actually do this, accidentally or otherwise, and instantly lose days or even weeks of farming gear events. It's really kinda poopy of Gumi not to return the excess equipment books here, or at least not let you craft without like 5 warnings that you're pulling out a 12 gauge shotgun and shooting yourself in the foot. To sum up, when you're crafting plus versions of gear, make sure you don't over level the materials going in, or just be very careful not to select them. One way to avoid this is simply by selecting the gear and flagging it as a favorite. You'll see here that by marking my Ras Algathis as favorites, they no longer can be used to craft. Now that we understand how the pyramid works, let's talk about what I like to call the +2 system, which allows you to have great gear now while also not sacrificing anything for the future. And this involves using the dismantle feature. Dismantling a piece of gear returns all of the crafting materials used to make that gear, except for the recipe. So there's a few things we need to know about how this works. Dismantling returns any of the materials used to craft or awaken the current piece of gear, including equipment books. So if I go to my Drakeshorn Spear here, you'll see that I'm getting all 255 spear books back, along with the Baja Blast Mountain Dew, Fangs, and Beef Jerky. A few things to know here. First is that we don't get the recipe back, so you really should only be using dismantle on non-limited gear, or on limited gear, make sure that you pick up a couple extra recipes just in case. Next is that you don't get any adamantite or gil back, but more importantly, you don't get seals or hammers back. So dismantling isn't a way to refund seals or hammers on a bad piece of gear. Lastly is that if you dismantle a plus version of gear, you'll get back the 2 pieces of gear that you used to create it, but you get them back at level 1, 1-star awakening. So if I go to my +3 golden blade here, if I dismantle this, I will get refunded 2 + 2 golden blades at level 1. The fallout here is that I would be permanently out of the 60 greatsword books that I used to create this. There's people out there that use dismantling as a way to re-roll their +5s, which I just think is insane considering you're sacrificing over 300 equipment books each time you do this, but to each their own. Anyway, this brings us to the +2 system because you can safely dismantle a +0, a +1, or a +2 piece of gear and get refunded 100% of the books and crafting materials. So for example, right now we have the golden armor quest out, and even if you aren't able to farm 63 recipes and hundreds of Ahriman tiers before this event's over, you can craft and awaken a +2 golden armor that will still be very good, and in the future, you can dismantle that +2 and use all of those materials towards crafting a +5 later. If you go any higher than +2, you're permanently sacrificing equipment books to do so. This makes the +2 system extremely valuable and viable for free-to-play players, light spenders, or just casual players. Because the ultimate goal is to dismantle the piece sometime in the future and then use those materials towards a +5, I wouldn't recommend using hammers or seals on your +2 unless you plan on using the gear for a really long time, or you just don't care that much about the passive ability. For example, I've used a couple of evasion hammers on my mithril armor +1 because I don't plan on ever building a +5 version for more strike resistance. And on my casual account, I used seals and hammers on this Sage's hat because I plan on using this hat for a really long time. And my casual account doesn't farm like my main account, so by the time I get around to crafting a +5 Sage's hat, I'll probably have more seals. However, if you're a hardcore player or a min-maxer, the best practice would be not to use seals or hammers on your +2 because it's just a stepping stone for your +5 in the future. Okay, so we're going to use everything in this video and we'll see what we can do to craft a smart coat +5 and hopefully get max stats on it. That video will be posted as a part 2 for this video, so go check that out if you're interested, and thanks for watching.